Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitnie Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays, 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, talking all things leadership. And today we're going to be discussing one of the components of our simple leadership framework. And one of the components that I think not only is part of our framework, but in general, doesn't get enough press, right? We need to talk about it more often because it is a part of everything you do, everywhere you go, and every interaction that you have. And so we're going to talk about leadership energy, how it shows up, asking some questions of you. How are you showing up? Are you bringing the energy to the room that you need to bring? Or are you bringing is the energy you're bringing to the room bringing people down or lifting people up? Right? Because energy is contagious. I was watching a movie the other night, and it's the first law of thermodynamics, right? Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just changes. It just shifts, right? It morphs. And so the energy that you bring, other people pick up on, they take on that energy unless they are self-aware enough not to, which often people are not. And that's how it happens. Energy is contagious. And as a leader, the energy you bring either helps you to build trust and momentum, or it drains it. And so we're going to talk about that. Some opening thoughts, Robert.
I think it's a great topic. I think when you said it doesn't get enough press, I think it gets press sometimes, but in the wrong way. As a person that works with executives a lot, I used to, not anymore, but used to hesitate mentioning energy to higher level executives, because when they hear energy, they think of woo woo, certain things. But we all have energy, and there's different types of energy. And what I do is I explain what I mean by energy. And I think that's one of the things that we can cover later, is really explaining to people what energy is, so that they're not thinking we're talking about auras and stuff like that.
So you're right. And that's part of it too, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's right. It's not mutually exclusive. And
absolutely.
I get what you're saying, because when people go down a particular path, it will often shut them down to being open to hearing what you're talking about. And so I think you're absolutely right. The place to start before we get into the other things is, what are we talking about? What is the energy that we're talking about? And so I'm going to let you go ahead and get us started with a definition of energy.
Energy is the amount of effort you're putting in certain areas. So it could be mental effort or energy. It could be spiritual energy or your purpose. And I want to define that, because when we say spiritual, people start thinking religious. We're not really talking about that. We're talking about sense of purpose. Of course, religion could be part of your sense of purpose, but we're talking about just your sense of purpose in general. And there's also emotional energy, right? So the effort that you're putting in, or what you're putting out, I should say, when it comes to emotions, is also your energy. It radiates from you, and you also absorb it as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the important keys here, is that it's transferred, right? Yeah. So you take it in, you give it out, and this will be for me the first key in how to show up the way that you want to, is having awareness about what your current state is, right? So if you're looking at your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, your energy, the effort that you are putting out or that you're absorbing, that you are paying attention to those things, because it's when you are not often paying attention to it that you have probably the more of a negative effect than you would like. And as I was thinking about this and preparing for this conversation today, I started thinking, looking at my work history, my leadership history, particularly when I was lobbying. And because I wasn't often aware of what I was doing, particularly early in my career. And it wasn't until the latter stages that when I decided I wanted to be a coach and started paying attention to these things, right? And sort of being on my personal and professional leadership journey, a development journey, that I was actually paying attention to how I was showing up. And prior to that, I just thought that people should get me the way that I got me. And that's not necessarily the way that it works. And it becomes important for us to really be conscious and aware of, one, what it is we want, how we want to be seen, perceived, experienced, and then checking in to make sure that that's where you are. So you have to be aware of your current energy state. And if here's something that came to me, if you've ever been asked when you walk into a room, what's wrong? Or if someone says to you, look like, I don't know, someone killed your cat, or maybe if you're lucky, you look like you just won the lottery, right? Or whatever they might say, that's your energy showing up, right? That's how you are showing up, and sort of having that tangible, those words that you could say, have I ever heard that, or something like that, might give you some indication to say, okay, here's some times when I was feeling a particular way, didn't know I was showing up that way, but obviously it was because people sensed it and they felt it coming into the room. And so, I started paying attention, because I was getting, not so much you look like your cat just died or someone killed your cat, but those questions of what's wrong, and it's like, well, nothing's wrong. Right? And it was like, well, nothing's wrong, and it's like, well, you look like blah 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 blah. And I was like, oh, okay, so I need to pay closer attention to that. And this is not about pretending to be something else. It is about conscious awareness of how you're showing up and asking the question, is this how I want to show up? Is this how I want to be experienced? Is this the energy that I want to give off? Is that the message that I want to send to people, that, my cat just died or whatever? And so just taking the time to ask the question and be aware and sort of sit in that, and then making conscious choices to do something different. And we'll talk about that as we go along in the show.
Yeah, and as you were talking, something dawned on me. I neglected one very important aspect of energy. Is your physical energy as well. I think about the others so much that I sometimes take physical energy for granted, and I wanted to include that. But also, I agree with what you're saying, because whatever you're feeling, whether it's emotional energy that is down, or your sense of purpose is down, or you're distracted because your mental energy is down, you don't have clarity, or you can't be aware of what's going on, it's going to manifest itself physically. These things typically happen, and I know you'll get this. You're distracted, but you have something that you have to lead, a meeting or something like that, or you're addressing some people, and you walk in the room. I'm just piggybacking on what you've said, and they're like, they can tell whether or not you're there mentally, because it is manifesting in how you physically interact with people. And you're 100% right. And I know we're going to talk about this. Creating intentions around how you want to show up will allow you to project the energy that you really want to have received by others.
Absolutely, it is. And of course, this happens frequently when we talk about something on the show, or before I go on the stage to talk about, XYZ, that something will happen that sort of will help to highlight, at least internally, whether I speak about it or not. And today was one of those days. And there was a little bit of a frenetic energy that I was having around the fact that I'm having technical difficulties. I lost my AirPods, right? So my small little earphones. And so now I'm going back to my old school, like, Beats.
We call them the cans. Back in my music studio days. We call them the cans. Put the cans on.
Going back to my old school. They're not old school, but they are my old school headphones. And then I couldn't get my camera to work on one of the computers. And so, and as I say that, totally first world problem, right? I have the luxury of having multiple computers. And so I had an option. And if the other one didn't work, which happens at times, I've got other devices. But in the midst of that, it was a little bit of frenetic energy because we were getting closer and closer to the time of the show. And as a result of that, I forgot to send you the link to the show. And then we started a little late, right? So that was my energy, how I showed up. And I very consciously and intentionally, saw that was happening and said, okay, it's showtime. Let's turn this around. And so it is possible to do. And again, I'm not talking about faking it till you make it. It's just about what is happening. What is it that you want? And if they're not aligned, then you have a choice to make. Are you going to do something about it or not do something about it? And the reason that this is important ultimately is because it impacts other people. And if the people that it's impacting are the people on your team, and it has an effect on whether or not they can trust you. We talk about authenticity here on the show quite a bit, right? Being in integrity, being aligned with your values. And if you are saying one thing and doing something else, people will see that and they're going to notice. And if it's not aligned, it will have an effect on whether or not they find you trustworthy.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things, is that you have to be in alignment with yourself. We sometimes forget that we, as individuals, because we are very social beings, we always have our antenna up. We don't always listen to what the messages we're getting, but the antenna is always up. And we've had those situations. We've all been in those situations where someone is saying something and you got the sense that they were being a phony, or they said something and you felt yourself being reeled in. That's because they were, either misaligned with their energy or really in tune with their energy and what they were talking about, and really believed it and was able to convey it to you in a believable way, which gave them credibility.
Absolutely. So first step, self-awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
To just ask yourself, what energy am I bringing right now? What energy am I bringing right now? And then remember that people are going to feel your energy before they process your words. So when you physically walk into a room, people will see you. And before you say something, whether they know you or not, they're forming opinions, right? If they don't know you, they're making their first impressions. And is it the impression that you want, right? And so it includes how you project yourself with confidence or not, right? Do you walk in? Are you distracted? Are you disheveled? And I can think of, and I'm going to share in a minute as we talk about sort of another component of this, how showing up in one space the way you were in the prior space, but it doesn't align with the next, and the trouble that it can cause there. Right. So are you tense? Are you distracted? Are you feeling rushed, frustrated, exasperated, whatever it is, right? Stop, think about what it is, and ask the question, right? What energy am I bringing? And is this the energy that I want to bring?
Right. I was going to say, creating that tension, that intention around the energy that you want to bring to that situation, so that it matches what you're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. So, and here's just a thought. How often do you actually pause and check in with your energy before walking into a room or a meeting or showing up? Right. We do a lot of things virtually. Your energy translates on camera just as much, if not more so. Right. And one of the things that I think you've been in this situation, Robert, but I've been on TV a couple of times, and they tell you to be bigger, right? You have to be, because it has to transcend the medium that you're on. And so, but it can feel like it's fake and phony, and it's like, just magnify what it is you're actually feeling. And it's the same thing that happens when you're taking pictures, right? And as part of the world, well, it's still a part now, but when I was lobbying, every other year we had to go in for headshots for, whatever the regulatory things were. And every time I just used picture I used last time. I enjoy going to take the pictures, getting a new picture, having something else, right? Having a different representation of how I was showing up and progressing and growing, not only as a person, but it throughout my career. And I have every picture that I took for the 18 or so years, so 9 pictures, and there you could see such a progression.
Yeah.
Like a little baby face when I started, didn't know anything, to the powerful, confident lobbyist that I was at the end. And you can see that. And I'm pretty sure it translated when I facilitated meetings, when I showed up in the governor's office or sat with, legislators or their staff, and it shows up. So
absolutely,
ask the questions. Just start there by asking the questions. Are you checking in? Are you pausing and checking in with your energy before you walk into a meeting or a room? And if you're not, suggestion, maybe start doing that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay. So now you have some self-awareness, and then the next key or the next step is to create space before you step in. And I'm going to share a couple stories, I think one of which I'm sure I have shared here before, but too often, right, we live these very sort of busy go lives. And I've got someone in my life who is constantly reminding me that she says busy is the next stupid, and that busy is not a badge of honor, right? So I don't mean busy as something to cherish, but we just lead sort of busy lives that we're buzzing and we're jumping from one thing to another. And too many of us, quite frankly, are rushing, no pausing, no resetting. And when you think about energy, it's that what you bring is usually the residue of whatever you just came from, right? So unless you create some space, unless you take some time. And one of the things I have tried to make a habit of is between meetings, and it started when I did meetings mostly in person, but between meetings, and I still do this now, even though most of what I do is virtual and online, is to create some space or leave some space between them, right? Have a calendar margin, have a transition ritual, even if it's only a few seconds. It doesn't have to be, right? It doesn't have to be a half hour between meetings, but enough of a space so that you can take a few moments and breathe, right? So it's as simple as taking a deep breath or having a moment of silence. This can make a huge difference for you before you go to the next thing, particularly. And again, I say I learned this. I guess I could say I learned this the hard way, is that running from one thing to another, taking the energy that was in one space to another, isn't always helpful.
Right.
And the work that I did often involved meeting with people who were, let's counter to the position that I was advocating for, is a nice way of saying it. Sometimes hostile to the position that I was advocating. And while I never took those interactions personally, I can't speak for everyone. And so sometimes when the conversations are heated and you're back and forth trying to establish that this is the position that I have for my clients or my constituents, and this is why it's important, right? It could get a little heated. And so being able to sort of just take a deep breath, right? Going from, I was in a situation where it was hostile. What happens when you're in a hostile environment? You get defensive, right? Your energy is appropriate for that, maybe, if you don't go overboard, but it's appropriate for that. And then it's not to then step into a space where the people are aligned with where you're going. And so there were times I would leave a meeting that was, kind of combative, and then sort of take that very, I'll know, not in a derogatory way, but very masculine energy to the next space and start off sort of with this edge or combative nature. And it's like, these are your people. They are in the same posture that you're in. There's no need for that. So taking time, creating that space so that you can step into the next room the way you want, but that only comes from having awareness about what it is you're feeling.
Yeah, I want to add to that, because as you were saying that, something else popped up in my head. What you're saying is absolutely 100% correct. But I think that we also need to understand that creating that space for yourself may include establishing boundaries. Because a lot of times when you're working in an office, especially when you're the leader, those boundaries can get blurred when people need you. So just being able to establish some boundaries so you can take the space that you need to recenter yourself, to get yourself, create some intentions about the next meeting you're going to or the next presentation or whatever. I think that's really important.
I love that. And you're absolutely right. And the beauty of awareness is that it allows you to stop and think about, what do you actually need, so that you can establish those boundaries. You can set the boundaries, whether it's time, whether it's physical space, right? Sometimes you need some physical separation. Sometimes you just need a little time. And if you need more, giving yourself permission to take what you need. And I would say that with the clients that I work with now, that seems to be one of the bigger challenges, is the boundaries piece and giving themselves permission to actually set the boundaries, right? Not thinking I have to be there for everyone at every moment. And then I don't have anything left to do either the work or the next thing. And the, going back to the premise that the energy is not created nor destroyed, it's just transferred, is to start looking for those opportunities of how you can transfer what you need. Where can you find that throughout your day? And one of our challenges, just sort of humanly speaking, that's not really a word, but you know what I mean, is that we tend to see things very linearly, right? One step after the and that's not really how life works. And it's not how energy works.
Right.
So going back to the self-awareness and understanding, when are you at your best emotionally, physically, spiritually, psychically, right? When are you at your best? And and those things don't necessarily align, right? You might be physically more energetic at a time when you're not necessarily emotionally energetic. And so getting a handle on that to see how you can structure your days, your times, your interactions with people, the important activities and tasks that you have in such a way that you are maximizing and leveraging your energy stores for different things in a way that will actually help you.
Yeah, and to your point, I think the better you can align all those different aspects of your energy, the more effective you will be. Certainly, the more powerful and the how should I say this? You'll project in a more powerful manner if you can align those things, your sense of purpose and your mental, emotional, and physical energy all in alignment. And there's a lot of things that can knock you off your game, but being aware of those will be very useful as well. So with your physical self, it's knowing when, hey, are you a morning person? Do you want to have that meeting in the morning? Do you want to have that in the afternoon? And do you work better on a full stomach? Do you work better an hour after you've eaten? Everybody's different. Knowing those things and mentally is how clear you are about the message that you're going to convey. We talk about this all the time on the show. Mastering your message, that's another part of it. And whether or not you are distracted, right? If you can perform without distraction, you're going to be way better and much better received than if you're distracted. Do you know how to respond emotionally to things that trigger you? If you're not able to do that, that's going to sap your energy as well. So there's lots of different things. Is what you're doing, is it in conflict with your core beliefs? That's going to really mess with your spiritual energy. So you have to really think about the different things that can influence your energy and either take energy away from you or fuel you so that you can perform at your best.
Absolutely. And it would add people to that as well.
Absolutely.
Right. And so there are going to be some people on your team or in your life, personal, that you interact with that have more of a tendency that you're more likely to drain energy, and others that are going to help you lift up your energy. And knowing, are you an introvert or an extrovert? What do you need to replenish? What do you need? Again, looking at boundaries, right? What are the things that you need to put some fences around so that you can protect your energy? And sometimes those are people. Sometimes it's activities. And there are things that you can do in addition to taking a few moments, in making that space in between, is being much more intentional about creating that space as part of your daily routine. So what I have found, and everyone has to find a pathway that works for them, right? There are suggestions that I can make, Robert can make, you could read books about. In the end, you have to find the activities or lack of activities, if that's the case, for you that helps you get there. Right. So things like journaling, exercising. Robert mentioned knowing how you feel after a meal, what foods energize you and what ones don't, right? Which ones zap you, make you feel like you need to go take a nap, as opposed to having, foods that fuel you and lift you up. And so taking the time to know that about yourself becomes really important. But people, and if part of what you have going on is that you've got people on your team that when you go to have a conversation with them, you're dreading it, right? Taking the time to prepare for that in advance. And we've got some episodes on difficult conversations. So if that's something you see as a difficult conversation, you can go back and look at some of the strategies that we've shared in the past about how to navigate those conversations.
Yeah, that social influencer is huge. One of the disciplines that I'm certified in is something called core leadership dynamics. And we talk about leadership as almost in ways as a performance, and those things that can influence your performance positively or negatively. And that social influencer, it can be huge when you're around people that just you don't click with, or it could be that one person that is triggering to you that can just throw you off your game tremendously. So yeah.
So do you have any things that you want to specifically bring to the conversation before I bring up the last thing that I have?
No, I've been silently, just not so silently, interjecting them as you're going. So I'm good.
All right. And then the last key that I want to share is, and these are not, they're not disconnected, I guess is the way I would want to say it. They sort of flow into and in and out of each other. But the third key would be to set the energy intentionally for the space that you're entering, right? So you have some awareness about how you are, what your current energy state is, asking the question, is that the state that you want to be in, or is most appropriate for the space that you're about to step into, right? Creating some space before you step in, go into, whether it's physically or emotionally, into the next thing. And then, right, setting that energy intentionally. Right. And asking yourself, what is it that this space actually requires? Right. What is it going to take? And one of my favorite questions, just simply to ask before stepping is what energy does this room need from me right now? Which may be different than what it needed yesterday or what it's going to need tomorrow. And one of our challenges is, again, in addition to sort of thinking things are linear, is that things stay the same, right? The status quo is a status quo. And so this is the way I showed up with this group of people the last time. So this is how I need to, and that may or may not be the case. And so I shared this in the past. I spent the better part of my last career, again, as a lawyer and a lobbyist, and I spent hundreds, if thousands of hours negotiating language for legislation and amendments for those legislations, in rooms with lawyers, in particular with lawyers. And if you've had the experience of one lawyer, let alone, 17 or 18 at one time, right? Taking the time, ahead of time to think about not only how I wanted to show up, but what that space needed from me. And sometimes it was flipping in the midst of what was going on, right? So it may not always be that you can prepare necessarily ahead of time, but you've got to be cognizant and aware enough to recognize what's needed from you in the middle of an interaction, whether it's one person, 10 people, 100 people, etc. Right? And people who speak on stages will get this. Performers, musicians, right? Performers, people who are in front of people will get this, because you will read body language and you can see, are they getting this? Are they with me or not with me? Have I lost them? And then you need to make some adjustments. And in a particular set of meetings for a particular bill that I was working on, that was a months long process, right? The way I showed up at the beginning of those meetings and throughout the hours, sometimes we would meet over the course of a full day, 6-7 hour meetings, really long sort of energy draining meetings, is that I learned to, before showing up to work, was to say, these are days that are particularly challenging for me, energy wise. I'm an introvert. I get replenished from downtime, right? So spending 6, 7, 8 hours with lawyers who are arguing over sometimes what seems to be some of the most minute details was very draining. And so I learned to prepare for that mentally, emotionally, spiritually before going. And then I recognized that when I start at the meeting, if things started to go in a different direction and something different was needed from me, to make the shift, right? I had to make the shift. And what it would involve was probably either taking a break, right? It's like, oh, now's a good time for a break, if that's an option. Or within, I would say, you guys keep talking. I'm going to step out. I need to step out for a moment to go sort of recenter and then come back. Or just sit quietly, breathe deeply, and then say, okay, this is what I understand is going on, and let's shift in this direction. And so there has to be a willingness to do that. But the way to get there is through curiosity, right? The way to get there is, again, from paying attention so that you know what is needed. So you're going to set the energy intentionally before, and you have to be willing to make the shifts in the middle or in the midst of what's going on.
Yes. And mindfulness is also very helpful there too, especially in those moments where you have to center yourself to get yourself back on track. I think that those tidbits you gave are very important, because a lot of times we don't know how to get back on track. We don't know how to shift. We're stuck in the mud in that one particular mode, and we don't know how to get out of it. And I think that a lot of times when you lose your audience or the mood is shifted, you need to, again, re-engage your intentionality and be mindful about the energy you want to bring to that group or to that task, actually.
Or absolutely. And that's a really good point, that the task, because we sometimes, again, we're linear and we're like status quo. Why isn't this working? I did this yesterday. I will say, speaking of mindfulness, the two tools, strategies, tools that have helped me in that, or in mindfulness in general, has been meditation and yoga, because they are practices that are very much about connecting to the present moment and being non-judgmental about what is.
Yeah.
And what can happen when we get stuck is we start on a feedback loop that is not necessarily helpful, by sort of chastising ourselves for letting it become what it's become, rather than saying, this is what it is. What do I need to move this, to shift it, right? And to so not get bogged down into the why. You can postmortem later, but in the moment, right, just accept what it is. Don't resist what is. This is what it is. I've lost them. And I'll speak for myself and my experience. Maybe you've got a different take on this, Robert, either personally or with your clients, but the authenticity says to own it and to say, this is where we are. And in order to get back on track, we need to do something else. So you don't have to pretend like what is happening isn't happening, because when you finally get to the point where you realize that it's happening, other people probably know it 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things that you can do in that moment, particularly when you're interacting with a group or your team, is when you feel like you're losing them or they look lost, is call it out. You know, it looks like I've lost you. As simple as that. But we sometimes don't want to show that vulnerability. We want to, just power through. And that could be the worst thing to do at that moment. Sometimes you just need to acknowledge it, that, hey, there's an issue here. I think I lost you on this, or I'm seeing some expressions that are telling me that you're not really connecting with what I'm saying. Let me hear what's going on. Ask some questions and re-engage that way. And we sometimes forget that. I had a manager that never quite got that. Whenever they would say something and lose the team, which would happen often, they would just plow ahead with what was going on and not really stop to say, hey, look, what's happening. The flip side of that, on the other side of that, I should say, is that a few weeks later, or sometimes a month later, or a few months later, the thing that we were reacting to, or our silent disapproval, would come around, right? It's like, well, when we say we're going to do this thing, we had thoughts that it wasn't going to work. We didn't feel that we could express those things. So while that was going on, that person lost us and didn't re-engage. And then again, compounding the issue, wasn't the type of manager that you could disagree with. So they were one of those people where if they were after the mistake was made, they would be like, well, why didn't you tell me this? And then you go, okay. And then it would happen after that, another error. You would go to address it, and they would push back really, really, with really defensive energy. So it created this loop where we just wouldn't say anything, and then something would happen, and then they would come and say, well, why didn't you tell me? We're like, well, we've tried this. So I think it's, vulnerability is also part of that, to be able to call it out and say, look, I think I've lost you. What are your thoughts about this? And address those things. Sometimes there are elephants in the room that need to be talked about, and just trying to ignore them is not going to be very helpful.
Point, and I've been in those situations, right? And it's difficult. We've done an episode on this specifically, and then we've talked about it in others, about being someone who can accept feedback. Your job isn't just to give feedback. You also have to hear feedback, and being open, creating an environment where your team members are free to, without retribution, right, are free to share what it is they need to share. That it's feedback, and that feedback is helpful if you will accept it as such. And so, and not take it as some sort of personal affront.
Yeah.
You've got to create that environment where people are free to share for the betterment of the team, right? For your growth, their growth, the team's growth. And it needs to be an environment where that is okay.
Yeah, and we talked about having that psychological safety there, where people can express themselves. So that was it was a kind of like a ongoing theme at that with that manager, and a lot of people moved on because it wasn't working out.
And that's what happens, right? When people don't feel safe, they can't express.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to live, work their purpose, to bring their best selves to the work, to the endeavor, to the environment. They want to leave. And
Yep.
if you want to keep that from happening, right, you got to create environments where that's not the outcome that people are seeking for self-preservation or whatever other reasons they may have.
Absolutely.
Right. So again, the 3 keys that I had were to be self-aware of your current energy, create space before you step in. That's time, that's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever it is you need to, as Robert mentioned, setting boundaries when you need to, when it's appropriate, and then holding on to those boundaries and giving yourself permission to do so, which means not kicking yourself for it. And then the 3rd key is to set the energy intentionally for the space that you're entering. And so, when you take the time and say, what does this require from me now? Right? Being present, mindful, as Robert said, and mindfulness is being in the present without judgment, right? There's no need to judge. It is what it is, and this is what's needed. So you can do that ahead of time, and you may need to do it in the midst of what you're doing, whether it's a task, a meeting, interaction, relation with someone, etc., and be okay with that. And the key is to be curious, right? To ask the questions that need to be asked so that you can set the tone that's needed ultimately to get where it is you're trying to go.
Yeah, agree.
Any final thoughts, additional thoughts, points you want to make that we did not cover?
No, this was great. You did a great job really highlighting those 3 pieces of information that everybody needs to really think about their energy. So I don't have anything to add.
Awesome. Couple of questions that I want to leave you with, and then I'm going to share how we're going to move through the rest of this month and a plan that we have moving forward. We'll see if it works out, right? Because we're flexible. We're flexible here. Structurally flexible, flexibly structured.
Yeah.
So a couple of final sort of thoughts, things to think about. What drains your energy the fastest as a leader, right? Being clear about what drains you. What kinds of things trigger you in the different aspects, emotional, physical, spiritual, mental, etc. What are the things that trigger you? What drains your energy? And who's the most energetically grounded leader that you've worked with? Think about that person. And maybe there's a conversation that you could have with that person to ask how they stay energetically grounded. You'll probably find that they work on it, right? I think often we look at other people and it seems easy and seamless for other people. And we think, well, It's so easy for them. Why isn't it easy for me? And you'll probably find that they're working on it as well.
Yep.
Right. And so it's okay. And then what's one boundary that you need to set to protect your energy? Think about the boundary that you need. It's just different than what Robert needs, which is different than what I need. And that's okay. It's okay. But have some awareness around these things. Okay. So we are talking energy all month long. We're going to be talking about energy in different forms. So today we talked about the energy of leadership and what you're bringing to the room. Next week, we're going to cover managing your energy, not just your time. Right. So, and we'll get in a little more into things like rhythms and boundaries and recovery. Touched on some of those things, but we'll get a little deeper into that next time. And then on today's the 5th, the 9th, the 19th, right? Team energy, how to read it and how to regenerate it, right? Robert brought this up: psychological safety, morale, team dynamics, right? Those are some of the things that are attendant to team energy. And then on the 26th, I believe that makes it, creating energizing work cultures, right? What's sustainability, sustainable pace, purpose-driven leadership. Robert mentioned purpose a couple of different times today, and being in alignment, right? So some different things that will help you in the various aspects of managing energy and recognizing that, you know, getting through your relationships, getting through the day, your tasks, etc. It's not just about time. It's not just about people and productivity, but energy plays a huge part, and just being more cognizant and paying attention is going to pay dividends for you in that respect.
Fantastic.
All right. Cool. So we have launched and I'm going to see if this works, what I'll call a curated newsletter. And it's here on it's on LinkedIn. And so it will probably come off of LinkedIn at some point, but at the moment, that's where it lives. And you can find it. I'm going to drop the link for it in the chat, which should hopefully, regardless of what platform you're on. So we stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, that you should be able to cut and paste that link, and it will take you to the newsletter. And so they're curated articles that will follow the theme of the month. And then there'll be a message from me, a message from Robert, occasionally one or the other or both of us you'll find there, along with the curated articles. And the whole point is just to keep you up to date on some things that are being said in the space that we're talking about. Okay, so we want to thank you for joining us on this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. Robert, if someone wanted to connect with you and get some help with their leadership energy, leadership presence, etc., how would they go about doing that?
They can reach out to me at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com. That is my email. Or they can just go to my website, which is Robert Hilliard Coaching, and look for that contact form, fill that out, and send it away. And we will set up a discovery call. We can discuss what's going on with you, your challenges, your goals, and see if we're a good fit for each other.
Awesome. And likewise, you can reach out to me at shiftingintooaction.now.site. Shiftingintooaction.now.site. There is a form there as well. Let's connect and let's see how I can help you. That goes for whether you're looking for coaching, consulting, or if you would like to be a guest on the program or would like to share topics for us to cover, reach out to us about those as well. So again, we want to thank you for joining us. We are here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, talking all things leadership. And just want to say, stay energetic, right? Stay up, stay connected to awareness about where your energy is, how you're showing up, and whether or not. Excuse me.
You okay?
Apologize for that.
Some California wildfires over there.
I need some water. I apologize. Thank you. Again, your energy, paying attention, awareness, you can make the shift. With awareness, you can't change something that you don't know needs changing. So until next time, I was saying stay energetic and take care.
Bye now.